Hello, my name is Vanessa. I'm 25, and the smell of fried rosemary is perhaps my most constant companion. I'm a cook at Romanos, a big, loud place full of steam and voices where metal, steam, and hungry customers blend into a single symphony. I've been here for 6 years, ever since I finished a short but gruelingly intensive culinary course at a local college. It wasn't university, it wasn't a dream, it wasn't prestigious, just a chance to survive. After high school, I knew it was either work or nothing. University was a luxury we couldn't afford. My parents didn't have the money to pay for my education, and state aid programs seemed to overlook those who were just slightly above the poverty line but still too poor for dreams. While my classmates discussed campuses and cities, I browsed brochures for short courses with boring titles: culinary arts, baking basics, pastry craft. Among them, the culinary course seemed almost like an adventure. 1 year, and a chance to get a job. When I first came to Romanos, I was a shadow, a chef's assistant, a small cog in a huge kitchen. My hands knew only a knife, a rag, and pots. All day, I endlessly chopped vegetables, until my fingers went numb, until my wrists ached. I washed mountains of dishes, polished steel tables to a shine, listened to the cook's shouts, their constant "faster, to the left, don't slow down." The work was hard, the day was endless, and the pay was so modest that sometimes I wanted to laugh to keep from crying. But I held on, year after year. Gradually, I moved up. Now I don't just help, I cook. My job isn't glamorous, but it has become a part of me. The movement of the knife, the heat of a sizzling pan, the rush and precision of motion. Yet behind the external stability lies a fatigue that never leaves, day or night. I don't work just one shift at Romanos. Almost every day it's 2. From 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then 3 hours to get home, shower, coffee, and back again by 5, to stand at the stove until 11 at night. Sometimes later, if the dining room is packed or a cook is sick. Days off are almost non-existent. Vacation is a word that sounds like a joke. Why do I do this? Because my family needs money. My parents have a mortgage, and they can't pay it on their own. My father works in construction, but jobs come in waves, feast or famine. My mother works part-time at a grocery store, 8-hour shifts for pennies. It's barely enough to make ends meet. And then there's Jessica, my younger sister. Jessica is 20. She's been in college for 2 years now at a state university out of state. She lives in a dorm, sends photos with friends, smiles against backdrops of autumn campuses and coffee mugs. Studying there is expensive. Too expensive. Tuition, housing, food, textbooks, trips home. My parents decided that she should study, that she has potential. When she turned 18 and got her acceptance letter, they looked at me and said that Jessica deserved a chance that I, apparently, did not deserve. They said I had already chosen my path when I took the culinary course instead of fighting for university, that I was already employed, that I was earning. So I had to help. The family, the mortgage, and of course, Jessica. "You love your sister, don't you?" my mom asked, and I said I did, that I would help. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to say no. So I did. For 2 years now, almost my entire salary goes to my mom. She pays for the house and for Jessica's education, and I live on what's left. It's just enough for gas for my old, rattling Ford, for a little food, and sometimes for a meal at work if I'm lucky and something remains after my shift. I don't buy new clothes. I wear the old ones until they're threadbare. I don't see friends. It's not so much a lack of time, it just became awkward. How do you explain you can't even afford a cup of coffee? I still live in my parents' house, in my small bedroom. The room hasn't changed since my teenage years. Peeling walls, an old dresser that creaks with every touch, and a bed whose springs have long since given up. It smells of old books, dust, and something faintly of the past. In the evenings, I sit on the edge of the bed and listen to the TV droning somewhere behind the wall, my father coughing in his room, my mother shuffling through bills. I count the hours until my next shift and think that life seems to have passed me by without even stopping to ask, "Are you ready?" But I hold on, because if not me, then who? Sometimes I catch myself imagining my own apartment, small but mine, maybe with a balcony where I could drink coffee in the mornings and listen to the city slowly waking up. Sometimes I even browse listings, not to buy, just to dream. But then I remember the numbers on the bills, the balance on my card after I give almost my entire salary to my mom, and the dream evaporates like steam over a pot. Most of the time, I don't even allow myself to think about it. Fatigue consumes everything. When you work 12, sometimes 13 hours a day, 6 days a week, you have no energy left for thinking, no room for dreams, no room for hopes. Life turns into a repeating cycle. Kitchen, noise, smell of oil, home, quick dinner, sleep, and again, morning, again, Romanos. Sometimes I feel like I'm not living a life, but a cycle of recipes where nothing can be changed without risking ruining everything. Jessica comes home rarely, once a month if we're lucky, sometimes less. When she appears, the house fills with a different kind of air. Everything around seems to come alive. Mom bakes pies, Dad jokes, music plays in the living room, and I'm either at work or sitting quietly in the kitchen, trying not to get in the way. When Jessica is home, she hardly talks to me. All her time goes to friends, the ones who also came back from college for the holidays. Sometimes she comes to my room, but only to ask if I can lend her some money for little things, or to complain that her professors are unfair and that studying is hard. I nod, smile, and give. My parents beam around her. They listen to every story, laugh, ask about her friends, her professors, her plans for the future, and they don't seem to notice me. Not out of malice, no, more out of habit. They decided long ago that there's nothing to ask me about, that I had already chosen my path. Stove, knife, pots. In their eyes, I'm just the person who feeds others, and I suppose they think that's enough. I've gotten used to it. Over the years, I've convinced myself that this is how it's supposed to be, that my life has meaning as long as I support my family, that being a good daughter means sacrificing yourself, that by helping my sister, I'm doing something right, almost sacred. But that certainty shattered one evening, on a Tuesday, when I came home after a double shift. The house was drowning in laughter. That put me on alert immediately. Usually at this time, my parents were already asleep, the TV mumbling quietly and only the kitchen clock ticking a weary tick-tock. But that night, lights were on in every room. I took off my jacket, put my bag by the door, and went to the kitchen. All three of them were there, Mom, Dad, and Jessica. They were laughing, discussing something animatedly, their eyes shining. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them so happy. "Hey," I said, feeling my shoulders grow heavy. "What's going on?" Jessica turned to me, beaming. "Vanessa, I was just reminding Mom and Dad that my birthday is next week. I'll be 21. She clapped her hands like a child. "I decided to celebrate here, at home, not on campus." "That's great," I replied, trying to smile. "We can have a small family dinner, just relax together." Mom exchanged a look with Jessica, then smiled broadly. "Sweetie, Jessica has other plans, real grown-up plans. Next week, on Sunday, her friends are coming. 25 people in total. Can you imagine? We've already discussed everything." I blinked. 25 here? "Of course," Mom said with that special glint in her eyes she gets when something is finally decided. "We haven't had a party in so long. It'll be fun. And you, Vanessa, need to be ready. You'll cook the food, clean up afterwards, be nice to the guests. And please, act like you're happy about it." Her words hit me like cold water. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, soaked in the smell of the restaurant kitchen, with aching arms and a buzzing head after 13 hours on my feet. They want me to work at home too? On my only day off? "I don't agree," I said quietly. Too quietly for it to sound like a protest. But Jessica heard. "You're so selfish," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "I knew it. You don't love me. You want to ruin my birthday." My father's voice cut through the air, dry and icy. "Vanessa, you will do as we say. If Jessica wants a party, let her celebrate at a restaurant, I said, already feeling something I'd held inside for so long rising up. Fatigue, bitterness, resentment. Mom laughed, a short, nervous laugh. A restaurant? Are you joking? We don't have money for a restaurant unless your boss agrees to do it for free. My boss won't work at a loss, I replied. You have to pay for food, for staff, for everything there too. Mom's smile vanished, as if wiped away from fogged glass. Something hard, unfamiliar, almost businesslike appeared in her gaze. Then it's like this, she said evenly. Either you find the money for a restaurant for Jessica, or you cook and clean here yourself. Her guests are coming. The party will happen. The only question is who pays for it. I stood motionless, feeling as if the ground had shifted slightly under my feet. Were they seriously talking to me in that tone? I supported them. All of them. Paid for the house, covered the bills, did everything so they wouldn't want for anything. And now I was selfish, ungrateful, the person who ruins the party. Now they wanted me, after 6 days of hellish work, to spend my only day off in the kitchen, cooking for 25 people and cleaning up after them, at my own expense. My head was buzzing like an overloaded pan. I didn't yell. I didn't want to make a scene like Jessica. I just turned and went upstairs, feeling the old steps creak under my feet. In my room, I closed the door, turned the key, and leaned against it with my back. The silence seemed strangely dense, as if the house wanted me to hear only my own breathing. I sat on the bed and stayed there for a long time, unable to cry or think clearly. Everything inside seemed frozen. The minutes flowed thickly, turning into hours. I stared at the blank wall as if it were a silent mirror reflecting not the room, but the emptiness inside me. Gradually, the noise downstairs died down. The voices became muffled, cautious, as if they were afraid I'd come down and spoil their mood again. Sometimes, Jessica's voice pierced the silence, loud, irritated, complaining. No doubt she was still whining about me ruining her birthday. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The anger was fading, leaving only sadness. A heavy sadness settling somewhere under my ribs. I wasn't hurt so much by what they asked me to cook, but by how they saw me. To them, I wasn't a daughter, not a sister. More like a tool, a convenient mechanism that brings money, cooks, cleans, and doesn't complain. I felt like a sort of walking ATM with a cooking function. A remarkable combination, a machine that both feeds and pays. Mentally, I counted all the money I'd given them over the last 2 years. The numbers added up to a sum that made me uneasy. Over $50,000. $50,000. A sum that could have bought a small apartment of my own, started savings for my education, or simply allowed me to live. And I was still sleeping in my childhood bedroom, where old-school notebooks lay under the bed, and it smelled of a time long past. And now they were demanding that I spend my only day off, a day when I could finally just be a person, on serving someone else's fun. It was almost funny, from the sheer helplessness. And suddenly, Sarah's face surfaced in my memory, my colleague, a waitress from Romanos. Over the years, we'd become close, not friends in the usual sense, but people who had seen each other at their most exhausted. She knew almost everything about me, about my family, money, night shifts, how I hauled sacks of groceries while others slept. And she'd told me more than once, straight out, "Vanessa, they're using you. That's not a family, that's exploitation disguised as love." I used to brush it off, said Sarah just didn't understand, that it's how things are done in our family, that I was doing it voluntarily, and she would just shake her head and repeat, "No, you're just afraid to admit to yourself that you're not okay with this." Her words burned me then, and now, sitting in my room, I suddenly felt she was right. A few weeks ago, Sarah had mentioned offhand that she was looking for a roommate. Her lease was up for renewal, and her current roommate was planning to move out. Sarah had said with a smile, "If you know anyone reliable who can pay half, let me know. I don't want to look through ads." Back then, I just shrugged and said I didn't know anyone. It never crossed my mind that this offer might one day be my salvation. But now, in that cramped room where the air felt thick with silence and hurt, the thought suddenly became crystal clear. Maybe I was the person she was looking for. I picked up my phone. My fingers were trembling, but not from fear, from a strange excitement like before something inevitable. Sarah answered almost immediately on the second ring. "Hey, Vanessa!" Her voice always held a light cheerfulness, as if she were speaking from a place where life was simpler. "You sound upset. What's wrong?" "I am upset," I said, and my voice broke, became hoarse. I told her everything, every detail. How I stood in the kitchen, listening to them discuss my only day off. How Jessica screamed that I was selfish. How my mother gave me the choice between money and forced labor. How my father didn't even take my side. Sarah listened in silence. Sometimes I heard her exhale heavily into the receiver. Short, angry sounds, as if every word about my family grated on her ears. When I finished, there was silence. A few seconds, and then her voice came through, sharp, firm, almost in order. "That's it. You're moving in with me." It took me a moment to process the meaning. "What?" I breathed. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," she said without hesitation. "This has gone too far, Vanessa. I've been telling you for months you need to leave that house. They treat you like a maid who pays them for the privilege. Enough. You don't have to pay for someone else's happiness." Her words, simple and direct, hit harder than any shout. I felt something inside me crack for the first time in a long while, like ice finally giving way to water beneath. "But how can I began uncertainly. "The roommate? You said—" "Of course I'm serious. The apartment is available and I haven't changed my mind. You have no idea how much money you'll have left when you stop supporting 3 adults. You can easily handle the rent. And imagine, you'll have your own money. For life. For yourself." We talked for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. Sarah told me about the apartment. 2 bedrooms, bright, 15 minutes from Romanos. Rent split in half, everything simple and fair. "You can move whenever you want," she said, "even tomorrow." "Tomorrow morning?" I asked, feeling something turn over inside me. "I have the day off today. I don't think I can stay here any longer." "Perfect," Sarah replied, and I heard her smile. "I'll be waiting for you." When I hung up, the silence in the room seemed to fill with light. I felt not fear or doubt, but something I hadn't felt, it seemed, for years. Excitement. It was a feeling like the morning air before a journey. For the first time in a long time, I was going to do something not for my family, not out of duty, but for myself. I spent the rest of the evening in the semi-darkness packing my things. I didn't have much. Clothes, a few books, a kitchen knife gifted by the head chef, my first real tool, old photographs, a couple of letters, a note from Jessica when she was 10. Everything fit into 3 cardboard boxes I found in the basement under old jars of jam. I tried to move quietly, almost soundlessly. Everything was quiet downstairs, and it seemed even the house was breathing cautiously, as if it didn't want to scare me off. I didn't want anyone to hear me walking around the room, opening drawers, creaking the closet door. Any sound could become a question, and I had no answers left. Close to midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They approached slowly, almost on tiptoes. Then, a light knock. "Vanessa," my mother's voice. "Can we talk?" I closed my eyes. "I'm tired, Mom. Maybe tomorrow?" "I need you to stop acting like a child," she said restrainedly, but her voice held a weariness that sounded like reproach. "Think of your sister. She deserves a nice party. It's important." I smiled in the dark, quietly, without malice, simply because I could no longer take those words seriously. Mom had no idea how close her important had come to its finale. "Tomorrow, Mom," I said. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." "All right, dear. Good night." I listened as her footsteps receded, then the door to their room creaked, and the house sank into silence again. I finished packing. I put the boxes in the closet under old blankets so no one would notice in the morning. Then I lay down, but sleep didn't come. My thoughts ran in circles, like mice under the ceiling. I was afraid, not openly, not to the point of trembling, but somewhere deep, where the habit of obedience lived. I had lived the same life for so many years that the very idea of change seemed implausible. What if I was making a mistake? What if they really couldn't manage without me? What if everything I called responsibility was actually the meaning of my existence? And without it, I would disappear. But then I remembered Sarah, her voice confident and warm. You don't have to pay for their comfort. They're using you, Vanessa. This isn't love, it's dependency. I remembered Jessica, her shout, her eyes full of resentment. You're selfish. You're ruining my birthday. In that moment, I understood for the first time that her words weren't about love, but about power, about the fact that I had always been convenient for them. And then, my parents. Their cold tone when I, exhausted to the limit, dared to say no. Their accusations of ingratitude, even though I was the one paying for every month of their peaceful life. With these thoughts, I met the morning. The clock showed 6. The house was asleep. The sun barely touched the windows, and in its light, everything seemed quiet, clean, new. I got up, dressed without turning on the light. Carefully, one by one, I carried the boxes down, 3 trips down and up the stairs. The floor creaked, but no one woke up. In the kitchen, I put the key on the table, next to a cup with dried tea from yesterday. I looked around for the last time. The same walls, the same smells, the same voices, frozen somewhere in the air. I walked out, closed the door, got in the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. When I arrived at Sarah's apartment, the door was already slightly ajar, and from inside came the smell of freshly brewed coffee and something cozy, almost homely, maybe cinnamon. Sarah stood on the threshold, a mug in her hand, all bright like the morning, smiling so widely as if greeting an old friend after a long voyage. "Welcome home," she said simply, and those 2 words, for some reason, meant far more to me than any hello. The 2 of us carried the boxes upstairs to the 2nd floor, where my new room was, not large but flooded with sunlight, with one window facing the street and white walls, clean as a sheet of paper before writing begins. We moved in silence, but there was an ease between us, as if everything was happening naturally, as if I was always meant to come here. We spent the whole morning unpacking and setting up my corner. Sarah helped, holding things, screwing things together, laughing when I tried to hang a shelf crookedly. At one point, she sat on the edge of the bed, watching me carefully arranging clothes in the dresser. "So," she said, "how does it feel to be free?" I stopped, holding a stack of folded t-shirts. "Scary," I admitted after a short pause, "but good, really good." Sarah smiled without answering, just nodded as if confirming, "That's exactly how it should be." When we finished, she suggested we celebrate. We ordered sushi from a nearby restaurant, got some beer, and settled right on the floor, among the boxes and still unpacked books. The sun slowly sank behind the houses, and in its golden light, our impromptu picnic felt like the start of something new. I couldn't remember the last time I'd allowed myself to just be, to laugh, eat with my hands, not watch the clock. It was a real celebration. For the first time in many years, I was doing something simply because I wanted to, not because someone demanded it. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone suddenly came to life. The screen flashed with Mom. I stared at it, and everything in my chest seemed to clench. Sarah, noticing my expression, raised an eyebrow questioningly. I sent the call to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Dad this time. Then Jessica. Then Mom again. The phone rang persistently, as if trying to pull me back into the life I had left. "Probably they went to check your room and found it empty," Sarah said calmly, looking at the screen. "Well, let them panic a little." I put it on silent mode, but curiosity got the better of me. After an hour, I opened the messages. The first ones were full of confusion. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" Then, anxiety, almost irritation. "Vanessa, where are you? Your room is empty. What's going on?" That was from Mom. Next, a short message from Dad. "We need to talk. Come home immediately. Jessica's party is coming up." And finally, Jessica, I can't believe you're doing this to me. My birthday is in 5 days. I showed it all to Sarah. She looked at the screen and just snorted, shaking her head. Look at that. Even in a panic, they only think of themselves. Mom wants to know where you are, but isn't interested if you're okay. Dad demands you come back for the party. And your sister, she's worried about her celebration, not about you. Her words sounded like a diagnosis, and it was accurate to the last detail. I reread the messages, and indeed, there wasn't a drop of care, not a single attempt to understand why I left, how I was feeling, only confusion and irritation. My leaving had disrupted their usual script, and now they were scared not for me, but because I was no longer playing my role. Let them worry a little, I said quietly, watching the blinking phone. Let them think about what they've lost. The next day was Monday. I woke up in the new place, in a room that smelled of coffee and fresh paint, and the first thing I felt was lightness. There was no habitual guilt, no weight of expectations, no voices behind the door, just the morning light and my own breathing. I went to work as usual. The kitchen at Romanos was noisy, pans sizzling, knives clattering, smelling of oil and basil. I was just chopping vegetables when I heard Mr. Romano's voice behind me. "Vanessa," he said, "your parents are here. They want to talk to you." My heart seemed to drop into my stomach. Of course, I should have guessed. They always knew where to find me. "I'm not sure I want to," I said, feeling the familiar tension rising inside. "You don't have to," he replied softly. "But they look very upset. Maybe it's best to just get it over with." I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep breath, and followed him to the dining room. My parents were sitting in a corner by the window where the regulars usually ate. They looked like strangers. Mom pale, lips pressed together, Dad with a darkened gaze, as if he hadn't slept all night. Mr. Romano led us to his office to give us a chance to talk in private. As soon as the door closed behind him, Mom pounced on me. "What are you doing, Vanessa?" Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with anger. "Jessica's birthday is in 4 days and you just disappear." I stood straight, feeling everything inside me grow calm, as if someone had switched off the old mechanism of fear. "I moved out," I said simply. "Moved out?" Dad frowned. "What do you mean, moved out?" "It means," I replied, looking directly at him, "that I don't live at your house anymore. I have my own apartment now." Mom flushed as if her cheeks had been hit by heat. Her lips trembled, and her voice rose to high, sharp notes, tight as a stretched string. "This is just ridiculous. You need to come home immediately, Vanessa. Jessica's friends are coming on Sunday, and you need to clean up, plan the menu, buy the groceries. We're counting on you." I froze, then couldn't help but laugh. The laugh was quiet, almost soundless, but it held a strange bitterness. "You really think I left home to work for you even more?" Dad, standing nearby, frowned, looking confusedly from me to Mom. "Then what is this about?" he asked. "What are you even trying to say?" I straightened up, looking at them calmly. For the first time in a long while, the words came from within, evenly, confidently, as if I'd been rehearsing them for years. "It's about me finally deciding to take control of my own life. I will not be giving you money anymore. I am not going to pay your mortgage, and certainly not Jessica's tuition." The blood drained from their faces almost in sync, as if someone had pulled the life out of them. Mom sank into a chair, her hand automatically moving to her chest, as if her heart had stopped beating. "You can't do this to us," she whispered. "We depend on that money." "You should have thought of that earlier," I said, keeping the tremor from my voice. "Before you treated me like a domestic servant." Dad opened his mouth as if to say something, but I didn't let him. "Do you even realize I gave you over $50,000 in the last 2 years? $50,000. That's almost an apartment. That's a future business. That's my life." Mom jerked her head up. Anger flashed in her eyes. "Don't be so greedy, Vanessa," she said coldly. "Only low people count money like that." I looked at her and suddenly felt something inside finally die. A thin thread that still connected us snapped silently. "I won't listen to your lectures anymore, Mom," I said calmly, getting up from the chair. "I've moved out and I'm not coming back. From now on, live as you wish. Pay for everything yourselves. If Jessica wants to finish college, Let her find a job. Let her try to earn even a fraction of what I brought you for 6 years straight. I walked to the door and opened it. The air in the office was heavy, like before a storm. You need to leave, and don't come to my work again. Mom jumped up, her voice becoming shrill, almost hysterical. You don't understand what you're doing. We're your family. But at that moment, Mr. Romano appeared in the doorway. His usually soft face was now stony, and his gaze, hard as a knife's edge. He'd obviously heard at least part of the conversation. Everything all right, Vanessa? He asked calmly. I exhaled. Yes, Mr. Romano, my parents were just leaving. We're not quite finished here. Mom tried to object, but Mr. Romano took a step forward. I believe you are. This is a restaurant, not a family therapy session. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We're not going to, she started, but he was already turning towards the door. John, he called. 2 security guards entered the office, big, silent men with tired faces. Please escort these people out of the restaurant and make sure they don't return. Mom shrieked, but Dad, pale, took her by the elbow and led her out without a word. Their footsteps gradually faded, and only the steady hum of the air conditioner remained in the silence. Mr. Romano turned to me. You okay, kid? He asked softly, as if speaking to a daughter. Yes, I think so, I exhaled. Thank you. He nodded. Family matters are tricky, but you have to remember, you can't let people wipe their feet on you, even if they're your parents. Those words stuck deep inside me for some reason, like a nail in wood. I nodded, feeling something strange rise in my chest, a mix of relief and exhaustion. I finished my shift in silence, moving mechanically between the stove and the counters. When I left the restaurant, the sky was already darkening, and the city seemed both foreign and new at the same time. The air smelled of rain, and for the first time in a long while, I breathed deeply, filling my lungs. At home, Sarah met me with worry in her eyes. Well, she asked. It's over, I replied, sinking onto the sofa. I told them everything I needed to, but they don't seem ready to give up. I took out my phone. 17 missed calls, dozens of messages, one after another, like echoes of panic. Please come home. We'll talk everything over. We're not angry. Jessica will understand if you don't help with the party. Sarah read over my shoulder and snorted quietly. They still don't get it. For them, it's still about the party, not your life. I nodded. Yes, but I think it's time to show them with actions. I opened the banking app. My fingers trembled slightly, but the movements were confident. A few taps, and I canceled the automatic transfers that went to my parents' mortgage and Jessica's college payments. No more regular deductions, no more family contributions. Then I called the university's accounting department. The voice on the line was polite even. I'd like to inform you that I will no longer be paying for Jessica Walsh's tuition. Please direct all future payment inquiries to her parents directly. When I hung up, I felt light, as if a huge stone I'd been living under for years had finally been lifted. For the first time since school, my money was mine. My time was mine. My life was also mine. My family didn't give up easily. Their persistence was like glue, sticky, exhausting, unrelenting. Every day, at different times, the phone vibrated in my hand like a living thing, delivering reminders of the past I so wanted to leave behind. At first, they spoke softly. Mom's voice sounded strained but affectionate. She missed me, couldn't manage without me. The house is empty without you. These words felt not warm, but coldly calculating, as if she were reading a script written by someone else. Then Dad joined in. His messages were short, businesslike, almost like estimates. It's hard for us. We need to talk. And of course, Jessica, with her usual tone of a petulant victim. You ruined everything. I don't know what to do now. When that didn't work, they changed tactics. The bargaining began, like at a market. If you come back, you won't have to work at the party, Mom wrote. A day later, a new message. You can be a guest. An honored one. I showed this to Sarah. She raised an eyebrow, then theatrically rolled her eyes. An honored guest, she repeated. What an honor. To watch your sister celebrate while someone else cooks using your former money. We both laughed, but the laughter was short. tired. I closed the message, stared at the screen for a long time, and then simply blocked all their numbers, without regret, without drama. I was tired of listening to their endless attempts to pull me back into the nightmare I had struggled so hard to escape. 2 weeks passed, not a sound, absolute silence, a strange, blessed emptiness where no one demanded, expected, or accused. They were the calmest 2 weeks in many years. I still worked at Romanos, working my usual shifts, but for the first time, I felt the weight of constant pressure lifting. No more covering others' bills, paying a mortgage, or scraping together money for Jessica's textbooks. My body felt lighter, my shoulders freer. Even my walk changed. I no longer slouched as if carrying an invisible sack full of duties. I started taking days off, scheduled, like a normal person. With Sarah, everything was simple and fair now. We split expenses, planned purchases together. I even allowed myself small joys I used to consider inadmissible luxuries. A new dress, not from a sale, but one I liked. Dinner at a restaurant, not for a holiday, but just because I felt like it. And for the first time in years, the thought flickered. Maybe I could save for a vacation. But peace, as always, doesn't last forever. On a day when the sun cut through the kitchen window and I was chopping greens for a salad, the phone rang. An unknown number. I was about to ignore it, but intuition suggested, "This isn't Mom." "Vanessa," came a cautious voice. "It's Linda, your aunt. Can we talk? It's very important." I froze. My mother's sister. The one who always stayed out of family storms, observing from a distance. I figured Mom had probably sent her as a peace envoy, but curiosity won out. We agreed to meet after my shift, at a coffee shop downtown, small and quiet, smelling of caramel and old wood. When I arrived, Linda was already sitting by the window. Her hands were wrapped around her cup as if trying to warm herself, not the coffee. Her face was pale, her gaze anxious. "Your mother told me everything," she began as soon as I sat down. "Said you abandoned them, that they're in a desperate situation now, need help." I sighed. "Did she tell you why I left?" Linda frowned. "Yes, she said you got upset about Jessica's party." I almost laughed but held back. Instead, I spoke calmly, without anger, just stating the facts. For the next 20 minutes, I explained how it really was, how I'd paid their bills for 6 years, financed my sister's education, kept their house afloat while working double shifts myself, how every no from me caused a storm of reproach, how they treated me like a servant obligated to help because family. Linda listened, but her gaze gradually glazed over. She wasn't hearing me, just waiting for me to stop so she could say her piece. And finally, she sighed and said quietly, with that very reproach that used to tie my stomach in knots as a child, "Vanessa, I understand you're tired, but families help each other. Your parents raised you. Now they need your support." I clenched my hands. "I'm not going to support people who treat me like I'm a thing. They don't respect me. They don't care about my life, my desires." Linda shook her head. "They're struggling now. Your father has to work 2 jobs. Your mother works extra shifts at the store. And Jessica, she took a leave of absence from college. They had to drop out." The words fell like stones into water, but caused no ripples, no sympathy. I just replied wearily, "That's their life, their decisions, and their consequences. I'm not responsible for everyone." Linda's face reddened. Her voice became sharp, like the crack of a whip. "I can't believe how selfish you are. If you're going to act like this, I don't want anything to do with you either." "That's your choice," I said calmly, feeling how everything inside had long since turned to stone, impervious to persuasion, condemnation, or even pity. And although Linda's words held a note of near pleading, I knew the way back was closed. She stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched on the tile floor, threw a bill on the table, and walked out without looking back, leaving behind only the smell of cheap perfume and cooling coffee. I sat for a few more minutes, looking out the window where rain had begun to softly settle on the glass, turning the street into a blurry watercolor, and thought about what she had said. My parents, it turns out, are working, taking extra jobs to pay the bills, My father probably hauling boxes or tightening nuts in some warehouse. My mother standing at a cash register, smiling wearily at customers. Jessica took a break from her studies to save up for her own education. It all sounded as if someone had finally lifted the heavy burden I'd carried for so long that I no longer noticed its weight. Yes, somewhere deep under my ribs, a slight sense of guilt stirred, like a tiny splinter. But the feeling of relief was much stronger. They were finally living their own lives, not mine. They had finally taken on the responsibility I had carried for them for so many years. Several months passed, filled with that strange, even silence that comes when there's no more shouting and demands around. Sometimes news about my family reached me through distant relatives or acquaintances, like echoes from another world. I was told my parents were managing, though it was hard, that the mortgage was still a millstone, but being paid on time, that Jessica was working in a retail store, living with our parents, and planning to return to college once she saved enough. I listened to all this as one listens to a chronicle from another life, without delight, without schadenfreude, simply with quiet acknowledgement of the fact they managed. Relatives, as is customary, split into camps. Some whispered that I was a monster who abandoned my family in their hour of need. Others, especially the younger ones, spoke with respect, almost envy. My cousin Mark once said, "You shouldn't feel guilty for finally choosing yourself. They used you. Any normal family would help, not drain you dry." I remembered his words because they contained, for the first time, what I had lacked all those years. Simple human understanding. Now, when someone tries to reproach me, I no longer justify myself. I simply say, I decided to take control of my life, and I don't feel guilty for it. I carried my family on my back for 6 years, a family that treated me as if I were nothing, and that is more than enough to entitle me to peace. My life has changed beyond recognition. Everything became simpler, clearer, as if I had finally taken a full breath after a long submersion underwater. I still live with Sarah, and our relationship is a rare example of harmony. No fights, no mutual complaints, just calm friendship and respect. We share expenses, laugh at silly things, take turns cooking. Every month, I have money left over, enough not just for necessities, but for little joys. A trip to the movies, a new book, fresh flowers in a vase. Recently, Mr. Romano called me into his office, which always smells of basil and fresh baking, and said he plans to promote me to head chef next year. It meant not just a raise, it was recognition, a long-awaited confirmation that I was worth something on my own, not as someone's daughter or older sister, but as a professional, a person who had achieved something. I caught myself not feeling afraid of the future for the first time. I'm making plans, my own, not imposed by anyone. After the promotion, I decided to cut back on my hours. No more double shifts unless something truly important comes up. I want to learn how to rest, study for myself, not for someone else's expectations. Maybe I'll sign up for culinary courses to improve my skills, or just spend more time at home, enjoying the quiet and the smell of coffee in the mornings. And next month, my first vacation in over 5 years. Sarah and I are going to the coast just for a long weekend. Not a luxury resort, not a faraway country, just the sea, sand, and the sound of waves. And most importantly, it's my decision, my choice, my gift to myself. I'm not doing it for anyone, not fulfilling a duty, not paying for someone else's happiness. I'm just living. Sometimes, late at night, I think, what would have happened if I hadn't left then? Probably everything would have continued in a loop. Endless work, fatigue, a sense of duty. I'd still be living in that childhood bedroom with the pink walls that had long become too small, working double shifts and giving my salary to my parents, cooking for Jessica's 21st birthday, then her 22nd, 23rd, and so on, ad infinitum. Now I look at it from a distance, like an old movie where the main character is always trying to save everyone but herself. I'm not that character anymore. I don't regret my decision one bit. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living not in anticipation, not in fear, not in guilt. I'm living for myself. And even if it took me 25 years to understand that I, too, deserve my own life, now that I finally realize it, I feel like I'm truly breathing for the first time.